Shut up and sit down.
I've entitled our study today, What are your measurements? And since we're not competing in a beauty pageant, but a business pursuit, it seems like a totally fair question. I want us to keep our focus on your career. What do you measure to achieve a profitable, attainable, repeatable, sustainable, and measurable result? And I think it's a fair question for our consideration today. You are a hard worker. You're a dedicated professional. You're dedicated to your professional, spiritual, and family life, and look at you. You win a lot. You also lose a lot, but in the end, most of you are going to come out on top because regardless of whether you win or lose, you're a winner. But thinking of yourself like a winner and actually winning by looking at your profit and loss statement can be two different things. Have you ever heard the expression, you won the battle but you lost the war? Sure you have. We need to go no further than our impression of the Vietnam War to prove my point. If I were to ask you, did we win that war or did we lose that war? The vast majority of you would say we lost it. In fact, according to Gallup, 96% of all baby boomers believe that America lost the Vietnam War. And it hurts me to say that because some of the most incredible people I even know in life served our country in that war. And I have nothing but respect for the immense sacrifice of the men and women who gave so much for our country. Forget the reasons for the war. If you just consider those who served, your heart is overwhelmed with thankfulness. Now, if you're not, you're probably not going to see the point I'm trying to make in this message anyway. The question for you is, how can we win every battle and still lose the war? Many of you have studied the Tet Offensive in 1968. Over a 24-hour period, over 85,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops attacked over 125 American-held targets in country. It was a total surprise attack. It caught Americans totally and completely off guard. And from history, you remember from World War I, a Christmas truce was called where no fighting would take place, equally in tune with our own traditions of Christmas. Tet was the celebration of the Lunar New Year for the Vietnamese. So the holiday took on tremendous significance for them, just like Christmas does for many of us. So it was supposed to be no fighting on Tet. Yet the North Vietnamese saw an opportunity to break with tradition, overwhelm the Americans, and surprise the opposition. And what a surprise it was for all concerned. However, the Americans didn't just surprise back, they repelled every single attack. They decimated the attacking Vietnamese and won every single battle. Most of the major fighting took place over the course of a week, and now it's time to tally up the scorecard. America had lost fewer than 1,000 troops. In contrast, the North Vietnamese experienced losses in excess of 35,000 troops. In the city of Hue, where the fighting continued a little more than a week, America lost 150 Marines compared with an estimated 5,000 troops for the North Vietnamese. And there it is. It's not just the Tet Offensive we're considering here. If you study the Vietnam War on the whole, you come away with some remarkable discoveries. America actually won the vast majority of the battles she fought. How long did we struggle with that war? Over 10 years. You remember the news footage or the social studies class or the newspaper coverage that reflected over 58,000 dead Americans being transported back to the United States, and you cried like me. But you didn't know this. Vietnam, North Vietnam lost over 3 million people in that war. As a percent of the population, that's equivalent to America losing 27 million people back in 1968. And ultimately, you must ask yourself this question again. How does America win almost every battle, decimating the enemy, wiping out over 3 million people, and still lose the war? Well, let's go back to our original question of study. What do you measure? What do you measure to achieve a profitable, attainable, repeatable, sustainable, and measurable result? May I submit to you that in your business, if you don't have processes like these that measure, you're headed for trouble. Measuring may be the most important thing that you do, yet least accomplished thing we do in business. We love the data, we love the struggles, we love the fights. But when it comes to measuring why we were able to do this or why we're not making any money in this business, we tend to shut down. To be an effective business person, you must think like a good tailor. What does a good tailor do every time he sees a new client? He takes new measurements. He never assumes the person's weight, and measurements have remained the same because more often than not, they do not. Now, a few caution words about what we are to measure. Do not measure against others. Don't measure when you're in the dumps. Do not measure when you're on the mountaintop. Do not start with your most flattering body part, or in this case, most successful and obvious successful point in your business. Ask about the parts where you may be failing. Ask about specifics as to where we should be improving. And here's a real game changer. Ask others to measure you. You're probably the worst judge of your own measurements. Ask a jerk to tell you the truth. Jerks have no filter. They'll tell you what they really think. You know enough jerks, you'll find some out there. There's never lack of a candidate for a jerk. You can reach out and find somebody to tell you the truth. What I think doesn't matter nearly as much as what I do, and what I do doesn't matter nearly as much as what I am. Henry Ford said, if you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right. We are so different. And we must recognize that what serves as a good measurement for me may not serve as a good measurement for you, and vice versa. What serves as a great goal for you is a terrible goal for me. For instance, sometimes success in the battles which ultimately win wars isn't even part of the planning. It's found in the practice. Remember, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. Sometimes success is found in practicing over and over and over again so that we win the battle. But sometimes success in the battles which ultimately win wars isn't found in the practice, it's found in the planning. In my consulting career, I found that most businesses just fail because of poor planning. I love this quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln: if you give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe. Honestly, that would maybe be the best advice I've heard regarding business planning. Before you burst out blindly into the world, failing, repeating failures over and over again, maybe we should stop to sharpen the tools and invest in some real planning. And that's part of the purpose of these videos. It's part of the plan. But you can plan and still lose the war. But if you can find that one secret, that one tipping point that puts your business over the top, you may eventually win the war. The English army was outnumbered 6-1. It didn't look great for Henry V of England. They were up against the French force in northern France. Add to that, the English army took 3 weeks to march over 250 miles to that battle. Sort of a home court advantage for the French, so to speak. Now, during that journey, the English lost over 40% of their troops to sickness. On the other hand, the French, great spirits, better equipped, ready to fight a war, rested, home court, better prepared. And they had revenge on their side. They were hoping this battle would help avenge previous losses at the hands of the English. I continue. The English were apparently not armored that well compared to the superior weight of the French armor. But if you know your history, you know that the French were soundly defeated that day at Agincourt. How? Because the English had developed a game changer, vital piece of technology that was able to confound the French and start a chain of events that turned the tide of battle that day. It was called the longbow. It shot normal arrows, flimsy wood arrows, but the longbow gave significantly greater strength, more momentum, and that increased momentum created a speed and a force strong enough to pierce through even the thick armor of the French. So the English could stand hundreds of yards away with that flimsy armor, hurling these arrows through the longbow, cocked at 180 degrees toward enemy soldiers, released in unison, and would pierce the armor of the French as a band of birds in the sky would destroy them. Now, found either in the practice or the planning stage, they won the Battle of Agincourt for the English. And you can read it in their history. It's quite intriguing. Sometimes we call it traction. It's referred to as a tipping point. But make no mistake, when you find it, when you find your longbow in business, it will be a game changer. Can you still lose the war? Yeah, but you just won a battle. Winning a war requires more than a momentary win, but it will lead to a strategy that can be sustainable and repeatable and measurable. What is required is a lifetime of commitment to process. Let me prove that to you in one final illustration by my favorite author, a man by the name of Simon Sinek. In his book, The Infinite Game, he records that he'd been asked to speak in an event for Microsoft back in the early 2000s. He received a nice honorarium for the event, and when it was all over, he was given a Microsoft Zune as part of his honorarium. The Zune was Microsoft's chance at competing with Apple's iPod. Sinek says it was exceptional. Exceptional in quality, elegantly designed. The user interface was simple, intuitive, very user-friendly. He said, I really liked it. He continues, in full disclosure, I gave it away to a friend for the simple reason that unlike my iPod, which was compatible with Windows and everything else I had going on with my iTunes, it didn't work with my iTunes. So as much as I wanted it, I was already invested into iTunes, and so I just gave it away. A few weeks later, he's a keynote speaker at an Apple event, and as fate would have it, part of his honorarium, he's given the newest iPod as part of a stocking stuffer. So, after his talk at Apple, he shares a taxi ride back to the hotel with an Apple executive number 54 to be specific, so he'd been there since the early days, and Sinek sat there in the taxi wondering, should I say it? Should I even bring it up? And finally, he got up the courage to say to the Apple executive, I spoke at Microsoft and they gave me their new Zune. Stirring the pot a little bit, Sinek continued. He said, I have to tell you that it is so much better than your iPod Touch. The executive looked at Sinek and replied, I have no doubt. You're probably right. And that was that. The conversation was over. Number 54 didn't care that Microsoft had built a better product. Maybe it's arrogance, maybe it's confidence. I don't know, maybe he's just putting on an Academy Award performance, totally in control. But Sinek said his response was consistent with someone who may not win every battle, but knows how to win the war. Is that not the key? The real winners don't win all the time. They may even show up late to the party, like Apple. They may not be the most attractive or the sharpest tool in the shed, but they know how to win. The key to Apple's success and the success of the English at Agincourt, and even the persistent sacrifice of everything holy as witnessed in the sacrifices of the North Vietnamese. You can see a commitment to principle over practice and planning. Here's the principle of commitment today. Measure with consistency, honesty, and integrity. Your future depends upon it. What do you measure to achieve a profitable, attainable, repeatable, sustainable, and measurable result? I told you that was going to be a good question, and I appreciate you considering it with me today. Thank you, team. Do you measure results or processes? Let me help you. If you measure processes, you'll never need to measure results. The results, the battles, the wars, the fights, the struggles, they all take care of themselves. Great lesson. I'll see you in our next unit of study.